Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to get started. Please come in and find your seat. Before we get rolling, I'd like to remind you, if you are a member of the Grayson Jockey Club Research Foundation, we have our annual members meeting, which will be right after the summit. It's over in one room in the Limestone Cafe. There's a sign there. If you have someone with you who you think might be interested in the Grayson Foundation, please bring them along. We'll try to convene as early after 5 as possible. We'll have a brief business meeting and a small talk, in case you haven't had enough talk today. And it will be in a social atmosphere, so please come if you're a member. And again, bring a friend if you think if you want to sign them in and think they might be interested. And now I'll turn it back to Donna Brothers.
Our next group of panelists will discuss the importance of continuing education. And when I met with Ed Bowen to discuss this summit, I was encouraged to learn that a couple of prominent racing jurisdictions are trying to implement required continuing education for trainers who race at their tracks, and for good reason. But for more on that, we're going to hear from Dr. Scott Palmer and his panel. Since graduating from the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine in 1976, Dr. Palmer has worked as a staff clinician at the New Jersey Equine Clinic, and he is a 2-time recipient of the New Jersey Equine Practitioners Veterinarian of the Year Award, as well as a recipient of the AAEP President's Award in 2009 and the AAEP Distinguished Service Award in 2010. Dr. Palmer has authored dozens of peer-reviewed publications and is a featured speaker at veterinary conferences worldwide. He is a member of several professional organizations and has held leadership positions in many, including the American Veterinary Medical Association, the American Association of Equine Practitioners, the American Board of Veterinary Practitioners. The list goes on and on. Dr. Palmer chaired the New York Task Force on Racehorse Health and Safety, which was formed at the request of Governor Andrew Cuomo in 2012 and in the wake of, sadly, 21 equine fatalities during Aqueduct's 2011 to 2012 winter meet. The New York State Equine Medical Director position was established last year as a key recommendation of that task force. Dr. Palmer serves as a board member for the NTRA Safety and Integrity Alliance Advisory Board and the Thoroughbred Charities of America. He previously served as the ARCI Special Task Force on Medication and chaired the International Summit on Race Day Medication, as well as the ad hoc RMTC Committee on Race Day Security, and served 2 terms as member of the Grayson Jockey Club Research Advisory Committee. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Scott Palmer.
Thank you, Donna, and thank you for inviting me to moderate this panel today. I'm very excited to do that. And I'm really looking forward to visiting with Rick and Alicia about some things we want to bring you up to date on in terms of continuing education. I think it's important, we heard all morning long about the value of data and the culture of data, if you will, a culture of information. And I think we've learned already this morning about some updates for jockey injuries and horse injuries and racing surfaces, terrific information. One of the key components of this process, though, is what do we do with that information? Once we gather the information, it's absolutely critical that we get the information into the hands of people that can use it. And that's where the continuing education piece of this comes into play. So what is continuing education? Well, there's many ways of talking about different types of continuing education, but basically it's a lifelong commitment to knowledge. And it can apply in a lot of professions. And if you look at this list, this is a list of healthcare professionals, both for people and for horses. And every one of these professions requires continuing education for their members. And the principal reason for that is that the people who are on this list make everyday decisions that can affect the lives or the welfare of people or animals. And yet in horse racing, only one jurisdiction currently has adopted a formal continuing education requirement. And yet, in spite of that, horse trainers daily make the same type of decisions. Horse trainers make decisions that affect human safety, horse safety, The economic impact of equine fatalities alone is estimated to be approximately $1 billion a year, so the economic implications are enormous as well. And something we talk about a lot these days is the future of our sport and branding it in such a way that integrity and safety are a major part of that brand, and the value of that is really priceless. So there's an enormous, compelling reason why we should have continuing education for the people that are making the decisions that drive the situation. So what are the goals of trainer continuing education? Well, first of all, in a general sense, we want to increase the level of trainer expertise across the board. And we want to be able to also reduce equine and rider injuries, raise the standard of health care, improve the quality of horsemanship, and improve the trainer's business model in what is certainly a compelling and consistently challenging environment for doing business these days. Just to give you a little background on the subject, this is not a new idea. And as early as 2006, members of the Welfare and Safety Summit in this exact building affirmed a need for continuing education for people that work with horses. It took 3 years for the ARCI to adopt a model rule requiring at least 4 hours of trainer continuing education, and that was proposed in 2009. In 2013, there was a survey of the HBPA showing that trainers were in favor of this concept. In fact, 80% of them were particularly interested in some type of an online program. 2014, the Jockey Club announced a partnership in the Advanced Horsemanship program with the National Academy of Racing here in Kentucky to form a partnership to create a continuing education program. And the topics today, we're going to try and give you a little bit of an update on that, or where we stand with that program right now. And now, just speaking from the New York perspective, we have I think this is just a slide to indicate that there are efforts across the country where we do have continuing education efforts underway. And all these programs are early in the process. I think California led the way in this quite a while ago, and Rick will fill you in on that. But there are efforts right now underway in a number of states to require continuing education for horse trainers. The New York program is a collaborative effort between the Gaming Commission in New York and Cornell University. And this program is a brand new program, essentially. And the plan of the program is pretty simple. There's really 2 phases to the plan. And the first phase is to require that trainers have continuing education. And our intention is to adopt the ARCI model rule in 2015 in order that in 2016, if a trainer wants to renew their license, they will have to have 4 hours of CE. And obviously, the second component of that is we have to have the content available for trainers to do that. And so at Cornell, we are working with faculty members at Cornell to create continuing education programs. And in the past year, we have given 7 so far trainer-based continuing education programs in New York at the Cornell Ruffian Equine Specialist Clinic or at the racetrack itself. Topics have included such things as lameness, colic, upper airway disease, regenerative therapy, fracture repair, and risk factor, understanding risk factors in horse racing. So there are a number of topics that have already been presented in a live CE format, but we recognize that there's a limited ability to get people into a room to present live CE. And so another phase of this program is to encourage and enlist the Cornell faculty to provide information that can be turned into CE modules so that every one of those topics can be presented nationally or internationally through the Advanced Horsemanship program. I think just to put this in perspective, in 1955, the American Association of Equine Practitioners held its very first live CE meeting. It was held at the Brown Hotel in Louisville, Kentucky, and there were 11 people at that meeting. And you might say, well, that just emphasizes the importance of how difficult it is to get people to come anywhere, to come to a meeting and learn something like that. But that meeting today is held around the country in different cities, and about a third of the membership of the AEP comes to that meeting every year. That's about 3,000 veterinarians. And we also have about 3,000 non-veterinarians at meeting as well. So that's a meeting that has 6,000 people come to it pretty much every year. And we have, over that period of time, demonstrated the value of this, and I think that the racing industry and the horse trainers can do similar things in our own world. Now, so the programs that we have right now are free of charge. All the programs at the Ruffian Clinic, or we have clinics in the theater at Belmont. We'll also have programs at Saratoga. And these programs don't cost anything. So a trainer can come to them, they come and they register. We give them a pre-test, they hear the talk, we do a post-test, and they'll get a certificate for attending that meeting. Some things that we can look at in the future when you think about the potential for expanding continuing education. There's a program called Veritas, which is a partnership between Cornell University and Texas A&M University that is a web-based program for continuing education. That is a very sophisticated online teaching technology program, which is interactive, experiential-based CE, but there's a fee structure associated with it. And this represents another level of training, if you will. And right now, that's not even on a part of this program, but it's something we can look at into the future. And even more than that, there's another program at Cornell called eCornell, which is a long-standing online learning subsidiary of Cornell University. And this type of program, there are actually instructors associated with each program. It is a self-paced program with flexible programming, but this program as well has a cost associated with it, and it's a significant cost because it's a graduate credit degree type program. So I mean, looking down the road, isn't it foreseeable that we could have similar programs for horse trainers where people could get a degree in this or have some kind of a credential that would be something far and above, just attending free CE programs? But I'd like to emphasize that really the current priority is to populate the Advanced Horsemanship program with enough CE modules so that trainers anywhere in the country can easily get their criteria of getting 4 hours of CE in order to get licensure. I think it's a small step forward, but it's an incredibly important step forward. I'd like to ask Rick Arthur to come to the program next. He's going to give us an update on the California work that they're doing. Dr. Arthur is the Equine Medical Director at the School of Veterinary Medicine at the University of California at Davis. He works to advise the California Horse Racing Board on drug testing, veterinary practice, and equine health, safety, and welfare issues. Dr. Arthur is a 1976 graduate of the University of California School of Veterinary Medicine and was a private racetrack practitioner for more than 30 years in the Southern California racing circuit. He is a past president of the American Association of Equine Practitioners and vice president director of the Oak Tree Racing Association. Rick is a member of the executive committee of the Racing Medication and Testing Consortium and the directors of the Grayson Jockey Club Research Foundation. He serves on the RMTC Scientific Advisory Committee and the International Federation of Horse Racing Authorities, Prohibited Substances, and Equine Welfare Committees. Dr. Arthur has been involved with medication, drug testing, and regulatory issues in thoroughbred racing for more than 30 years, and he is a member of the Jockey Club. Rick?
Thank you, Scott. We're going to make a little switch here. Okay. As Scott, a lot of the things that Scott said, I'm going to reiterate and remind everybody that the recommendation for continuing education came out of the first Welfare and Safety Summit for all people having to do with horses. And the real issue is, that was 9 years ago, but why do we really want to do this? And I think that there's a number of reasons. Number one, there's a lot of ways you can calculate this, but we lose about 3% of the horses every month that are on our racetracks. Not all of those are lameness, but most of them are. The cost of that is anywhere up to $100 million to $120 million a month just to replace our horse inventory. And it's a rather horrendous expense. Everybody talks about how our fans, the wagering public, pays for horse racing. When you look at the economics, they only pay for about half. The owners pay for the other half of this sport, and there's two ways to make money or cut your losses, and one is to increase your revenue, which has been a real challenge in horse racing. The other is to reduce your costs. Associated with this, we know from the necropsy program in California that 90% of all musculoskeletal fatalities are associated with pre-existing injuries. This is not a criticism. you should look at it as an opportunity. It's an opportunity that we can intervene and prevent those horses from suffering those catastrophic injuries. And those 3% I just talked about are not all catastrophic injuries. But catastrophic injuries are a window into lesser injuries that stop horses' careers. And the third issue are jockey injuries. The most serious jockey injuries, and if you look in California at the number of money spent on workman's comp costs for jockeys that are injured, that most of those expenses, the most serious injuries, are for jockeys and horses that break down. It's about a third of the jockey injuries come from horses that break down, but the more serious injuries are that same group. The other issue is public confidence, and I think one of my major frustrations with the industry, particularly with many of my colleagues in the veterinary profession and horsemen in the trenches, is a lack of understanding of the cultural change in the public towards animals and animal welfare. It's imperative that we do whatever we possibly can, convince the public that we're doing whatever we can to take the best care of the horses under our care. We will never have another major industry, a major breakdown in a major race that does not put horse racing under the microscope, and we have to recognize that. We need to be prepared, we need to be proactive, and continued education, I think, is key to that. Particularly when you go back and realize that many of the injuries that we face are avoidable, and there's ways with understanding what I'm going to be talking about, primarily bone physiology and the way horses break down, that many of these are avoidable. Kirk Breed, who is executive director of the California Horse Racing Board, established a very ambitious racing safety program in California. It included enhanced necropsies. We've done necropsies in California for 25 years. Amazingly, that's over 6,000 horses by this time, last 25 years. But the enhanced necropsy program utilized the Veterinary Orthopedic Research Laboratory, Dr. Sue Stover's laboratory, developed educational modules for trainers and also track surfaces. That program, unfortunately, was not properly funded, and that the funds weren't available to continue that. But in the process, and part of that, we developed online educational modules. We completed the scapular and humeral fractures, and I'll show you where those are, and they're in your packet as well, before we ran out of money. And they're the type of interactive programs that Scott was just talking about. The next one is bone physiology. And why do we want to look at bone physiology? Because 90% of our fatal injuries have pre-existing pathology at the site of that injury, which is that opportunity to intervene and avoid those fatal injuries if we understand it. Obviously, it's going to be hard to get people to talk about bone physiology, so we've titled this Training for Skeletal Health and Injury Prevention. And the concept behind it, if you were at this summit a couple of years ago, you heard Dr. Larry Bramlage talk about his training regimen and his lecture on training bone and the response of bone to exercise. What we've done is combine Dr. Sue Stover's information that she uses to teach bone physiology and from her experience in the necropsy program with Larry's material to put together a bone physiology module. And let me just cut off here, and I'm going to show you a little snippet of this.
Microcracks and the vitalized bone tissue must be replaced to maintain bone integrity and function. Fortunately, bones are living, dynamic organs which have osteoclasts that remove damaged bone and osteoblasts that replace removed bone with healthy bone. Bone remodeling is the mechanism for continual renewal of bone by replacement of damaged bone tissue with new healthy bone tissue. Because bone formation and bone resorption occur in the same location, bone material is not gained or lost, and the size and shape of the bone structure remains the same. Osteoclasts tunnel through bone, removing the damaged tissue. Osteoblasts follow and refill the tunnel with healthy bone. Looking at a microradiograph of a region of a cross-section of the cannon bone, areas of bone resorption and a recently completed new osteon can be seen. The rate at which damaged bone can be repaired is time limited. This is a critical piece of information. Severely damaged bone becomes even weaker during the repair process when many holes or pores are present. The affected region of bone is transiently osteoporotic. Subsequently, the affected region is weak until the pores are filled with new, healthy bone tissue, when the bone regains its strength. Note that the bone becomes porous and thus weak very quickly, within days to weeks. But also note that it takes 3 months for the bone to repair and regain strength. The consequences of having to repair a region of severe microdamage is a transient period of osteoporosis. Osteoporotic bone is weak bone. However, after repair is completed, new osteons toughen the bone, enhance resistance to fracture, and decrease susceptibility to injury. The focal region of osteoporosis has 2 important consequences. The reduced amount of mineralized bone material within the bone structure markedly weakens the bone. The weakened bone is more highly susceptible to accumulating even greater amounts and more severe forms of microdamage with continued exercise. This combination of events creates a vicious cycle of increasing damage and increasing weakness if affected horses continue to train and race at high speeds. Damage initiates bone resorption to remove the damage in preparation for new bone formation to fill the porosities. The resulting porosities create marked weakness. That's similar to the holes intentionally put between postage stamps to allow the stamps to be easily torn apart, allows for separation of bone fragments and catastrophic fracture.
Now, we're obviously not going to expect trainers to understand what an osteoblast is, an osteoclast, osteocyte, osteon. But the principle is that what they do training affects the cellular biology of the joint and affects the way the bone responds and how strong that bone is. Those are the principles that we're trying to get trainers to understand. And Larry is able to take this sort of material and put it in a much more practical way. And this is why we think a combination of what Larry's material and Dr. Stover's material, I think, will be so compelling. We've actually taken the approach with this. Excuse me, let me get the other slides back on. We've taken the approach of using this particular module. Let me go back up here a minute. This particular module to convince people of how important understanding this sort of information is. And we're also with funds from the Jockey Club, which has allowed us to finish up this bone physiology module. If it's successful and if we can demonstrate to Rick Bedecker and the California Horse Racing Board that we can do this efficiently and effectively, they're willing to help us raise funds for the two fetlock modules and the carpal module, which these 6 modules together will cover almost 70 to 75% of all the fatalities we see in horse racing. We had a whole list of other modules that we can develop because of the expertise from the experience of 25 years in the necropsy program. But when you think about it, there's opportunities for nutrition, dentistry, shoeing, workman's comp, immigration status, all those sorts of things. These modules are available online for free. The sites are in your book, and you can look at them here. Eventually, what we will have to do is, if we're going to record and monitor CE hours, as Dr. Palmer mentioned, there will be a pay-per-view. There's a monitoring process. As someone in the university, I have to sit through 2 hours of sexual harassment monitoring every 2 years. I have to do the same thing for ethics and in terms of animal use protocols to be certified by IACOC. We're also going to have to look at ADA compliant if we're going to require this. That means you have to have a certain font size. You're going to have transcripts along with them. All those can be done in the modules that we've developed. And we're going to have to do Spanish language translations. We experimented with some of that and think it can be done fairly reasonably, but not cheaply. We have other continuing education module or information on the Veterinary Orthopedic Research Laboratory website if anybody wants to visit it. There's particularly people are interested in necropsy programs in general. You talk about continuing education. We had the Chief of Staff of the Speaker of the Assembly out to the Maddie Laboratory last year, and we're talking about continuing education. And he was rather surprised that trainers aren't required to have continuing education because he said, heck, we required beauticians to have continuing education. The fact is, we have jockeys. Since I've been equine medical director, there's been 2 dead jockeys, 2 quadriplegic jockeys, and 1 dead jockey and 1 quadriplegic jockey were on horses that broke down in races. If we're going to, the people who are going to be putting those horses out there, we have an obligation to protect both the horse and the rider. RCI actually got ahead of most of the rest of the industry with their model rule. California has been working with our rule, trying to figure out how you handle a trainer that comes in for a few races. We had some debate on this. We put it on the back burner simply because the product, the continuing education that we're requiring isn't out there yet. I think it's an obligation. I'm waiting to hear what Alicia has to say, what's available. We need to develop an accreditation process to get this done. The X on the January 2000 was supposed to be 14. Obviously, we're a little late on that, but hopefully we can get it back in line. But continuing education is a very key component of protecting our horses. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rick. Next, we're going to hear from Alicia Benben, who is an academic coordinator and instructor at the North American Riding Academy. A part of the Bluegrass Community and Technical College, NARA trains its students to be successful in various professions in the racing industry, including jockeys, exercise riders, grooms, and trainers. Alicia is a graduate of the Casanova College, where she received a Bachelor of Professional Studies in Management, Equine Business Management specialization. Prior to joining NARA, she was a licensed assistant trainer in Kentucky, Indiana, and Minnesota, and has had various positions in the equine industry in both thoroughbreds and sport horses. This gives her a very unique perspective, I believe, in our industry, and I'm very excited to have her be a part of this program. She's going to share with us her work that she's doing with the Advanced Horsemanship program. Alicia?
Thank you, Dr. Palmer. I like to say just what an honor is to be up on the stage with such 2 distinguished veterinarians as well horsemen, and I'm very excited today to share with you the work that the North American Racing Academy has been doing in conjunction with the Grayson Jockey Club on the continuing education efforts and how exciting it has been to be a part of this opportunity. To start, I'd like to just give you guys a little background on the North American Racing Academy and what we do for the industry, both in the classroom and online. Since 2006, the North American Racing Academy has been the traditional workforce training provider for the thoroughbred industry. From racing to breeding to sales, NARA has had the opportunity to train and prepare hundreds of students for the employment opportunities available within the thoroughbred industry. both on the ground as trainers, assistant trainers, sales coordinators, and in the saddle as exercise riders and jockeys. By offering a 2-year associate's degree in equine studies with a focus on either horseman or jockey pathway, as well as a variety of 1-year certificate options in workforce training, exercise riding, and veterinary assisting, NARA is able to provide students various channels in which their career aspirations can be achieved. With the goal and mission of providing quality instruction paired with real-world application, NARA is looking toward the future and exceeding industry and student needs. In 2013, NARA furthered its reach by offering international employment opportunities, as well as expanding its curriculum to include many of our equine studies courses in an online format. This slide shows we are providing up to 8 courses currently in our program that are now available to our students online. Our online initiative has also allowed our students to continue their studies whenever and wherever their career goals take them. Whether it's here in the States or overseas, we're able to engage and interact with our students anytime, any day, with just the click of a mouse. With NARA's commitment to continuing education and its online initiative, as well as the Grayson Jockey Club looking for ways in which continuing education can be delivered in an easy and accessible manner, an alliance was formed. At the last Welfare and Safety Summit, it was announced that the Grayson Jockey Club and NARA would align on the collaboration and production of free online educational programming available to all racing jurisdictions, licensees, and anyone interested. I'm going to now show you and demonstrate the work that we've been doing for the past year with our continuing education entitled Advanced Horsemanship. When we began conceptualizing what an advanced horsemanship course should consist of, we looked at key areas and challenges that we knew courses would need to address. The first one would be content. Content of any continuing education course is key. Content is the main drive, as well as what entices a user to log in and enroll. Content needs to be relevant, interesting, and useful for its end user, in this case being a licensee. These 3 criteria are vital to the success of any advanced horsemanship course produced. Tracking course completion was a main concern addressed at previous summits, as well as with other individuals looking to provide continuing education content. Providing licensees a simple way to notify commissions about completion, as well as making it easy for racing jurisdictions to identify course completion were additional challenges that we knew courses would need to fulfill. Moving on into the development phase of our courses, we then decided to make a foundation of a click and learn on-demand design. This means advanced horsemanship courses are rooted in interactivity, as well as are accessible whenever and wherever with a computer and internet connection. This click and learn style encourages a user to engage with the material while completing required tasks. There will be various tasks set forth on a slide that a user must interact with in order to move on through the course. This can include clicking a button, which will reveal either more information, an image, a video, watching a video on the screen itself, or completing a self-knowledge check, which is a non-graded assessment on material previously covered in the course. As the user engages with the slide and interacts, they will progress through, and they must fully complete all the tasks set forth in order to get to the end result of the course, taking around 1 hour in length. I'd like to now flip to our internet connection and show you a demonstration of our first advanced horsemanship course that is available, Understanding and Managing EHV1. So when a user enrolls in a course and they begin, they'll come to a title slide and we'll be using navigational buttons on the bottom of the screen to either go back and forth with the material. Coming to this first slide here, we discuss what is EHV and then explain that there are multiple types. Instead of just having this information listed out in lines of text that someone could read, we use interactive buttons to hide information. So in order to read about the various types, a user will have to click, showing information, as well as hiding it. The buttons will change colors to signify to a user that they've interacted. If they try to move to the next, a pop-up button will show that there is still information needed to be completed, and then they're allowed to progress and move on. One of the really beneficial things about interactivity is that it allows us to disseminate information in a more reader-friendly format. Rather than having lines and lines of text on a screen, we're able to hide information and decide when we want a user to interact with it. We're also able to make relationships and direct concepts between terms, various images, anything really that you want to, by using interactive buttons, markers, and the other features allowed to us through this programming. Here we have a self-knowledge check that, again, a user will try to successfully complete. If they pick the wrong answer, they'll be rejected to try again. Depending on the type of question it is, if it was a true-false and they incorrectly answered it, they would be given an explanation of why that answer was wrong. So we're still going along with that whole goal of trying to reach the person that's on the other side of the screen and inform them going through the process. We'll flip back now to our presentation. So as a user interacts and engages through the course, what is the end result? Where will they get to? The last slide of a course is a submission form page. This submission form page is embedded directly into the course itself, where a user will fill out and then submit to the selected racing commission or commissions of their choice, notifying them of course completion. With the setup and design of the Advanced Horsemanship courses, rooting it in interactivity, we ensure participant interaction. By having the courses set up in this manner and allowing them to interact and move through the course at their own pace, by reaching the submission form page, it means they've successfully the course requirements set forth in the design. This form cannot be accessed outside of the course. Users cannot jump ahead. There doesn't need to be any test or graded assessment. We're simply looking for participants to be interactive with the material, to engage and learn a little on the way. Here's an example of a slide right before our submission form. We like to put a references, additional resources page with links to articles, research information further on the topic that's being discussed. A user will then go to the click here to receive course button and come to the submission form. We ask for your name, email address, the module name is already filled in for you, and then you can select multiple racing commissions depending where you are licensed at and hit submit. When you hit submit, an email will be sent to the designated representative of that jurisdiction, letting them know that you have completed the courses identified, and then you will also be sent an email letting you know which courses you have finished, as well as the jurisdictions that you have selected. That way, there are two ends to this puzzle of who's been notified and that the individual who's completed the course has a certificate saying, I finished it as well. Our advanced horsemanship courses can be located at the horses.graceandjockeyclub.org website. They are free and open to anyone interested. In order to access the content on the pages, a user just needs to create a very free, simple user account. The registration process is simple. We ask for your email and a password. You will then have an advanced horsemanship account that will keep account of which courses you are enrolled in and where you are in that particular course. There's also a variety of support documents available on the website, an equipment guide, how to enroll in a course guide to help you through the process. We currently have 3 courses up and running, ready for anyone to take. This includes the Understanding and Managing EHV1, the Hoof Inside and Out, and Understanding the National Uniform Medication Program. Looking ahead to the future of what we would like advanced horsemanship to accomplish, our goal is to provide 4 new courses every year encompassing a variety of topics. Potential topics include further look into equine health, specifically bone physiology and development, medications, use of intra-articular injections, imaging and diagnostic tools, and then outside of the health category, getting into those business principles and practices, as well as information on immigration, temporary foreign worker visas, things that would be of a vital asset for a trainer in their operation. As users begin to access the content, we will continually review for areas of improvement in order to make continuing education a seamless and user-friendly process. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. So I think you've heard a little bit about some different perspectives about continuing education, and there's a lot of consensus among the three of us about how important we feel it is. And I think it's pretty clear that when you reflect on the role that trainers and assistant trainers play in our industry, how important this is and what a priority it has to be. I think it's interesting that it's taken us 9 years to get to this point today, and I'm not bragging about that, but I would say that we're on the threshold of finally having course content in place, and we've been able to, as Alicia has pointed out, address some of the issues with registration and reporting, that perhaps we've removed the barriers that that all racing jurisdictions would be interested in addressing before they put something like this in place. I think that it's important here that we recognize that we do have modules available, and we also recognize that we will have to make some rule changes in every jurisdiction to make this a national rule. Rick alluded to the concern about what to do about trainers outside of California that may only race 12 days, I think it was, outside the state, or something like that.
We had talked about if a trainer started more than 12 horses, he would have to submit CE requirements.
Exactly. So the same concern was expressed to me by Rick Violette when I discussed it with him in New York. He said, well, what about people that are shipping up to New York? It's all well and good to have a New York requirement, but what do we do about folks that want to run in the Belmont Stakes? Do we make them take a course before they can run in the Belmont Stakes? Well, you know, Rick has addressed that a little bit, but from my point of view, if you have a national rule that requires 4 hours of CE around the country, that problem goes away. So I think that it's very important that we advocate for that at this point. I think it's also important that horsemen play a vital role in developing topics and helping provide the delivery of CE. So at this point in the program, we have some time, I believe, for some questions. But I'd like to just ask a couple of questions myself, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So Rick, starting out, from a regulator's perspective, Rick, what challenges do you foresee in accomplishing a national uniformity and requiring continuing education? And how should we address those challenges?
Well, first of all, a national policy, we can't get any national policies in horse racing. It doesn't matter what it is. But certainly RCI has taken a first step, and they do have a model rule. I think we have to encourage all states to make the requirement. As we've seen, there's an effort to develop online modules. I think it's the only way we're going to be able to get it to work. I think, as Alicia pointed out, and certainly with our discussions of UCD extension, which is very similar to your eCornell, there are ways to monitor these programs and to make them all interactive. If you look at the humeral and scapular module, you'll see that they have a Q&A that allows people to interact with it. It takes about an hour. But what we'll need to do is a accreditation process to make sure that all jurisdictions recognize, for example, will California recognize the NARA modules? Will Kentucky recognize the UC Davis modules? You have to get a process like that in place, and we just have to get people to make more modules. You know, my looking at this, I do think we would need to, like our veterinary profession does, you can take CE on business courses, but you can only take so many that don't have to do with actual clinical veterinary practice. So we may have to require a minimum of 2 hours on a year on horse health issues or something like that. But I do think there's a need, there's a way to do it. These things are not cheap, and as Alicia pointed out, the real hang-up is the developing the intellectual material. Once you get that, you can translate it into a module with modest effort But if you have good production values, it's not, it takes an effort and it's not cheap. I hate to tell you what the first 2 modules cost us to develop. I won't even say because it scares everybody off. But I do think for a good module, you're probably looking with good production values. You can be looking at $10,000 to $15,000 minimum on a module.
Thank you, Rick.
Depending on the topic.
Alicia, I have a question for you. Given that the registration the registration aspect and the reporting aspect of a continuing education program is a vital part of the learning experience, what efforts have you made from the administrative side in the Advanced Horsemanship program to assure that that component of the program is up to par with the quality of the education itself?
One of the issues that not only with continuing education and other professions, but even with students taking online classes is that this fear of where's the person behind the screen? They can feel a little lost in the sense of there's content, but I don't have an instructor. I don't know where the actual physical body is for this content. And one of the things that we've tried to do with the Advanced Horsemanship and myself is when we started to go with this is that we try to provide as many support documents as possible for users starting off. There's a user registration guide, we list the course requirements, the course content itself, how the courses are set up. We try to make it as seamless as possible, not make it too complicated. We know that there's always going to be a curve to learning, especially with technology and how technology advances, but making sure first that the course is understandable, easy to navigate is key, and then having someone on the back end to answer questions, concerns via email. My students, they could probably attest to this. I'm always there. I don't think I ever leave any time in my head or my office. And those types of support services we'll need to incorporate with the continuing education course, but setting up for success by having information laid out prior to and directing users where to go to read on some common troubleshooting, common errors, and then having an email contact. Currently, individuals can contact myself, they can contact Kathy or Jamie in terms of course issues, and we get back to them very quickly to make the order. Again, it's all about the user, it's all about the end user, making it a good experience for them. So the administrative support of this is very important, just as much as the production and the setup of the course itself.
Thanks, Alicia. Are there any questions from the audience for the panel? If not, Dan? There's a microphone right behind you, Dan.
From a perspective of the number of Hispanic trainers that we have in the industry now, are you addressing the fact that this may need to be either taught in Spanish live or a Spanish online course provided?
Rick alluded to his experience with that in California, and I think there's no question that it needs to be in Spanish and maybe even in multiple languages. If we want to go internationally with this, there's no reason why we couldn't do it in other countries as well. But I think Spanish would be the first priority, and you're right, we're going to have to do that.
We actually experimented with taking, I can't remember whether it was scapular or humeral module, and taking a section of it and having it translated into Spanish. The University Extension actually does that for other modules that they do, and it worked quite well. Of course, I don't understand Spanish, but I'm told it was easy to do, not inexpensive, but can be done. Because not only do you have to change the language, you have to change all the audio, you have to change all the font, text on all your diagrams as well.
I think looking towards the future, that having accessible languages is definitely going to be a need, especially in Spanish. North American Racing Academy has recently been partnered up with the International Federation of Horse Racing Authorities, so we're working with other schools internationally, and there could be possible resources in there to work with when it comes to translation, having other speakers of other countries read courses to make sure it's understandable in their native tongue. But I think definitely towards the future that those are some goals that we need to keep in the back of our mind and be able to address when the time comes.
Ned?
Could I suggest that we've all heard your presentations in past years, and you keep making the suggestions, but I do not see I don't see a lot of racing commissions adopting your recommendations. Would it be possible, because you've been here and talked about these issues and these programs for years, I'd like to suggest that we have a list and that we report next year on how many racing commissions have adopted one or more of your programs, and that we come here next year and we list those who have adopted one of your programs, because I go to a lot of commission meetings, I go to a lot of seminars, and as Keen Dangerfield said to me once when I was frustrated at the industry not doing anything about it, he said, forget about these commission and industry support and reports. Nothing ever happens. I'd like to put a period paragraph end of that and have us as a group come back and say, we're in, where are the others? And I think that would be an incentive to the people who are here and the people who are not here to take a look at this and take another step forward so that we can come here knowing that we have done our homework and can report positively on it. I'd like to make that suggestion, and hopefully we could get a consensus that that's in the best interest of racing and the horses.
Thanks, Ned. Well, the Welfare and Safety Summit is going to be an annual event at this point, I understand, right? And we have one racing jurisdiction that right now requires trainer CE. Let's see what we can do in 2016.
I'm Rick Bedecker from CHRB, and been working with Dr. Arthur in UC Davis Extension on, well, that was previously, but UC Davis, particularly Dr. Stover and now Dr. Bramlage, on the project that Rick showed you part of. What I think is apparent is that the work that is being done in California or New York or by NARA is going to benefit the entire country. And it really is kind of a dysfunctional method of completing this work that individual entities decide to do something. That is a preface to the fact that we are, without apology, in California, going to be soliciting help from interested parties in our state and around the country to get this important work done. Yes, each individual module is expensive, but if that burden is shared by all of the interested parties, and we know they're there across the country, then I think we won't be waiting another 9 years to be looking at really significant production and results and participation. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, please take our call when it comes. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? If not, I'd like to thank Rick and Alicia. Thank you very much for joining us today. Appreciate it.